Hi, welcome to Centerville Reports Today, Living History. I'm Maureen Russell Hodson. Throughout this year, as Centerville celebrates its 50th anniversary of city status, we're going to be talking with some of the key folks who were there from the very beginning. And my guest today certainly was. I'm pleased to welcome Vic Green, who was a council member in the late 70s, late 60s, and then you were also mayor from 76 through 80, right?
Correct, that's right.
So you have a lot of Centerville history, and we're going to try to get through a lot of this in this quick program. But let's start with a little bit of your history, because you came to Centerville in 1968, right?
Yes, correct.
So that was right when Centerville had become a city. What was attractive about Centerville to you?
Well, we had a very unpleasant experience in Dayton, which I had moved to in the mid-60s, and we decided we wanted to find a place, and there happened to be a restaurant in Centerville at the time called Antonio's Italian Restaurant, which is now a fish house, I believe, and we went down there for dinner, and I looked at the Villager apartments and said this would be a good place to move to, and so just on that spur of the moment thing, we moved to the Villager, and then later bought a house in Centerville, and
so
that's the story.
By the time you went from being a new resident to running for council was just about a year and a half or so, right?
Correct. I had been a city council member for 6 years and mayor for 4 years in Trotwood.
So you had a little bit of experience.
Right.
Right.
And so I got to know Jim Smith and Paul Hoy very well, Jim was the chief of police and Paul Hoy was the mayor. And I'd see Jim all the time at Frisch's, which is now on Far Hills.
Right.
I forget.
Archers, I think is
No. This is
other part of Far Hills. I couldn't tell you what that was.
Anyway, Ruby Tuesdays.
Oh, okay. Frisch's was there. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and we'd eat there frequently, and we'd see Jim, and he approached me one day and said that Paul Hoy had asked him to contact me to see if I'd be willing to run for city council, because they had a slate that wanted to get rid of the new city manager. They didn't approve of the city manager form of government, and would I be willing to run with two of the incumbents to kind of help protect them on the slate? And I did, and I surprised everybody by not only winning, but eliminating one of the people that was objecting to the city manager.
And you support city manager form of government also, right?
Right, yeah.
Well, and I know you've wrote a book several years ago, or it's been in process, and it's called Making a Difference. And really, throughout your career, I'm sure in Trotwood, but certainly in Centerville, you have made a difference. And I want to talk about some of these achievements. And I need to let our viewers know there are so many that I hope we can get through this list, but let's talk about, and you talk about this in your book, about the income tax levy. That was something that was new to Centerville.
Right. Well,
1970, is that?
My first meeting in 1969 was debating whether to renew the contract with the Washington Township to provide police protection, and the city was offering a contract for $125,000. No, they were offered a contract for $131,000, and the township said we'll only pay $125,000. So because of $6,000, the township decided to go to the sheriff, and the city had not figured that a good bit of the $125,000 was overhead, dispatchers and all that type of thing, which they couldn't get rid of. And so in the first meeting in 1970, the new city manager informed us that we had over $100,000 in unpaid bills. Our budget was now severely in deficit. The part-time city engineer had approved some overages on a county-city project, and the county wouldn't pay the city's share, their portion. And so we were virtually bankrupt.
Right.
And John McIntyre, who was a kind of a flamboyant city councilman, made that comment. He says, well, we're bankrupt. And the next day in the Dayton Daily News, there's big headlines, probably 6 inches high, saying Centerville bankrupt. And so we had to come up with ideas, And one of the ideas that I had proposed was to adopt a city income tax, which took 6 months to get, but it turned out, and in my little book that I wrote,
Sure, that's right.
I described that and what happened, and it turned out we took in much more money than we expected.
And still have
And
that.
that started us on the road back. There's a lot of other suggestions that I had that I'd learned through my experience in Trotwood, and a number of them I remembered in the book. But basically, we were on the road to recovery.
And when we talk about history, you worked with 3 city managers, right? John Griffin, Jim Smith, and Darrell Koenig.
Right.
And then when we talk about council members, Marilyn McLaughlin, who was
She was a clerk when I came there.
Yes,
she was there forever,
years,
and she's just a fantastic person,
Right.
just fantastic.
And really did so much for the city, both as a volunteer because she was so active in the community, and also as the clerk. And then I know Jim Singer was a good friend of yours as well.
Jim, when I ran for mayor, Jim Singer was a neighbor, and he agreed to help distribute literature around the neighborhoods. So shortly after I was elected, one of the council members moved out of town, and I nominated Jim, and that would have been probably 1976, and he served for 37 years.
He was the longest running council member in Montgomery County.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we could, J.V. Stone, Shirley Hines, a lot of these folks, good friends of yours that you worked with. Let's talk about some of the building, because what people see today in Centerville is certainly not what you saw when you moved here and then throughout your time as mayor. What do you see as some of the major changes?
Well, the proudest achievement of my career, I think, it was the fact that, and this was after I was mayor, was in conceiving the idea of Yankee Trace. I always felt while I was mayor and following that Centerville should have a community golf course. And I'd been to places like Muirfield in Columbus and Blue Ash in Cincinnati area, and seen these beautiful courses with homes fronting them. And I'd seen what other communities in the area had done, like Miamisburg, Springboro, and so on. And I felt Centerville should have a golf course community. And when we came across this land that one of my associates had listed, I suggested that might be the place. And the city agreed that if I could get 465 acres under option without general public knowing about it, because the prices would go way up,
Right.
that they would do it, and they'd pay me a flat fee. They didn't want me working on commission.
And I know the council at that time, led by Shirley Hines, who was mayor.
Right.
They were
Sally
really,
Beals was
Sally
on there.
Beals, Mark
Brooks
Kinsey,
Compton.
Brooks Compton, JV, and
JV,
Jim Singer as well, right?
Right, yes.
All visionaries who really
Right.
could see the potential and what this golf course could do. And of course, as we've talked, it's such an asset to not only that part of Centerville, but really the whole Centerville community and all of the entities that benefit from it. You were also involved in Bethany Lutheran Village, right?
Yes.
This is when you were mayor.
Yes. Pastor Ton came to me and said that he had a problem, that more and more traffic was going up and down Route 48, and they had older people exiting Bethany Lutheran Village, and he was worried to death there was some of them going to get hit going down the hill. The cars were going down the hill so fast, and he had approached the township about putting in a traffic light. And
Because it was in the township at the time.
It was in Washington Township.
Yes, yeah.
And that they said they didn't have the ability to put in a traffic light. And he went to the state, and they said there wasn't enough traffic count coming out to justify a traffic light. So I talked to city manager Darrell Koenig and said, can we help him? And he says, well, I'm just planning to change the ingress and egress across the road going into Village Drive. And he says, I can include a traffic light in the plan. And he did. And consequently, after it was completed, then I went to Pastor Ton and suggested that we could work together on other matters if they would annex to the city. And that, I think, has been the biggest financial plum that the city has had. And it's now a wonderful part of the community.
It is, and it's just amazing all of the projects that you've personally been involved with or that you've touched in some way. And I think a fun story is the monkey house that is now at Stubbs Park, that I think everybody who drives down Spring Valley sees the monkey house and wonders, how'd that get there? What's the story about that? And you have the actual story.
Well, it was down on Far Hills, a little ways north of Whip, and it was across the road from an old country general store. And the guy who owned the store was Monkey Miller, it's referred to. And across the street, he had this monkey house where he actually had live monkeys in there, and it was an attraction for many years. And Mr. Miller was deceased, and the family had sold the properties, and Wendy's was getting ready to build where the monkey house was.
Okay.
And so I said, well, that's something worth preserving. So I was very friendly with Tom Danis from Danis Industries, and I called him and asked him if he could have a crane come out there and pick up the monkey house and transport it to Stubbs Park. And he said, yeah, I'd be glad to do it. And so that's how Monkey House got to Stubbs Park.
And that's the story of the monkey house that we drive past every day.
And it's thanks to Mr. Danis.
And thanks to you and your vision of knowing that people would like to see that. I see kids out there just peering around it. It's a great place for photos as well. Crosspoint Center is something too that I think we all take for granted that it's always been there, but you happen to help see that go through, right?
Well, a little bit different story. Back when Elder Bierman was built, the Bierman Center, Arthur Bierman found out that the Barlow Corporation had purchased the land where Crosspoint Center is now located. And he was going to build the Dayton Mall there.
And I don't think a lot of people know that.
Right.
But that was the original site of the Dayton Mall.
Right, that was proposed site.
Right.
And Bierman was really upset because that's going to be a tremendous draw away from his center that he was building. So he said to the city officials, reportedly, I didn't hear it direct, this is what I was told, that he said, if you'll discourage DeBartolo from building the mall there, I will donate land on Spring Valley Road for your city building, and I will build you the building free. And they did it. Now none of that was ever made public, I don't think. But the present city building, the one wing, is the original building.
That's the west wing, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And so DeBartolo was so mad with all the roadblocks that the city put in his way that he bought land at Route 725 and 741 and built the Dayton Mall over there. And then eventually he developed, many, many years later, he developed the Crosspoint Center.
Okay.
That was.
So that's fascinating. I think when you drive around or when you think about, I know you don't live in this city anymore, you've moved out of state. When you look back on your time in Centerville, fondest memory or something that really strikes you?
Well, I think my fondest memory is the fact that Yankee Trace has been such a tremendous impact, especially on the school system and on the community, and giving it an image that it would not have attained in any other way. So that is my proudest moment.
Oh, that's a great story. Well, thank you on behalf of the city of Centerville and our residents for your outstanding service, for your years of dedication, and for truly making a difference in Centerville. I'm glad we had a chance to chat.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Go over.